to take part in this live performance. I want you to take part in this live radio broadcast here on Israel News Talk Radio. And you could take part in it by going to IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com and either calling the numbers on the top of the page. You could also click on that button that says chat room, and I will be in the chat room. I'm not there yet, but I will be in the chat room and be following the conversation in the chat room. So it's two things that you could do to be part of the conversation. You could call the number and be on the air with me, or you could do both actually. And you could go to IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com and join me in the chat room. So we're coming up to the Jewish holiday of Shavuot, and Shavuot is the holiday where we commemorate the giving of the Ten Commandments, the giving of the Torah to the Jewish people. And I wanted to take some time. I do this. I do this. I teach high school, and I do this in high school a lot. Especially with grade 9 students, because I think it works well with grade 9, but I want to do it with you. I want to play this game with you. What I generally do is we take a look at the Ten Commandments, a simplified version of the Ten Commandments. We don't have time to go into deep analysis, but a simplified version of the Ten Commandments, and we try to figure out if society in general follows the Ten Commandments or doesn't follow the Ten Commandments. My conclusion every year, and I don't think my conclusion is going to be any different this year than it has been in any of the past years, is that we do not follow the Ten Commandments. And we'll go commandment to commandment, and we will examine each one, a simplified version of the examination. We'll examine each one, and let's decide together if we follow the Ten Commandments or we don't follow the Ten Commandments. I think it'll be a fun exercise. So I'm looking forward to doing that here on Poltiical Hitman, and I want you to take part in it. So feel free to call in. In North America, the numbers are on, actually, around the world, the numbers are on the top of the page on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. You could go there on the top of the page, click on that chat room button, and you could join me in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I'm Howie Silberger. This is Poltiical Hitman.
And we're off.
I'm Howie Silberger, your political hitman here on Israel News Talk Radio. Thank you so much for joining me. You could call in North America. The number is 301-768-4841. In Israel, you could dial 02-6500151. Those are the numbers to call to get in on the conversation. Now, don't you worry if you didn't write those numbers down. They are on the top of the page at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. So just go to IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, click, on the top of the page, you'll see the phone numbers, and then you could click on that chat room button, and you could join me in the chat room. I will be in the chat room the duration of the show, so feel free to join me in the chat room, and feel free to call in and take part in the conversation. So coming up at the end of the week, we are going to be celebrating the holiday of Shavuot. Now, Shavuot is the holiday where Jews commemorate the giving of the Torah. Particularly the Ten Commandments are read on the day of Shavuot. Every year, at one point or another on the radio, we do this exercise. I do it in the high school when I teach high school kids, and I like to do it on my shows. I do this exercise where we take a look at the Ten Commandments, and we try to decide together whether the Ten Commandments are actually followed or not followed in today's society. So I wanted to take a look at a simplified version of the Ten Commandments. We could look at the full version, but it would just take too long. We only have an hour. So I wanted to look at the simplified version of the Ten Commandments, and we could talk about each of the commandments and how we do and we don't follow those commandments. So let's start with commandment number 1. We'll start from the top and we'll work our way down. Let's start at commandment number 1. I am your God, the God who took you out of Egypt. There are no other gods besides me. So in other words, do not have any other gods. Do we follow this commandment? Is there a general consensus that Jews and non-Jews around the world follow these commandments? Because the Ten Commandments were given to the Jewish people, but really given to the whole world. So do we follow this commandment that you shouldn't have any other gods besides the God, besides God himself? I will argue that we do not follow that commandment. I will argue that anybody who puts their job, anybody who puts their money, their possessions, their material possessions above God, and many, many people do. To many people, money and material possessions are God. They are not following that commandment. I would say that the majority of greedy North American capitalists do not follow the first commandment. Now, I'm not saying there's something wrong with capitalism. Don't put words in my mouth, and don't misconstrue what I'm saying. Well, what I'm saying is, when we look at the Ten Commandments and they say, do not have any other gods, and the Ten Commandments say, do not have any other gods besides me, that's God's direct commandment to the people. And we see people worshiping money, worshiping celebrity, worshiping ego. We realize that suddenly there are other gods besides the God of the God that gave us the Ten Commandments. You see, all the commandments kind of fit into each other. So one commandment doesn't mean much without the second one, and the second one doesn't mean much without the third one, etc., etc. So they kind of blur together in analysis. So I'm going to kind of blur them together a little bit too while we're talking. And by the way, if you want to get on the conversation, you can. In North America, 301-768-4841. In Israel, 02-650-0151. I'm Howie Silberger. This is Political Hitman. Feel free to call in. If you don't write the numbers down, feel free to go to IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, and they're right there on the top of the page. So the second commandment is, do not make or worship idols. So the first commandment and the second commandment kind of fit together. They're kind of the same. They're different, but they're the same. So I'm your God, the only God. Don't worship any other gods besides me. So don't worship money. Don't worship celebrity. Don't worship your likes on Twitter, your retweets on Twitter, or your likes on Instagram, or your likes on Facebook. Don't worship that. Don't worship materialism. Don't worship society. Worship God. And do not worship idols. So we do. As humans, we tend to worship idols. Now, I'm not saying that we're carving stones and we're bowing to stones. We're not doing that. That's passé. Our idols are a little more recent. So, when I do this with children, when I do this with young people, I ask the question. I find whatever the most popular celebrity there is at the time, and I ask them, if that celebrity walked into the room right now, how would you feel? And inevitably, all the kids say, my heart would beat, I'd start sweating, I'd feel really nervous, I'd feel, I wouldn't know what to say, I would stammer, I would stutter, I would be speechless, I'd faint. These are the answers I get from these, from kids, grade 9 students, normally, when I ask them the question, what happens if a major celebrity walks into the room right now, and you have to interact with them? And those are the kind of answers I get. I'd faint, I'd be nervous, I wouldn't know what to do. And I said, okay, fine. I can understand that. They're famous, and you're nervous around famous people. Fine. You respect them a lot for the work they do. You respect them a lot for whatever they're famous for. Fine. No problem. What would happen if you walked into a synagogue today? And they all look at me. Inevitably, I get the same response. They all just look at me with these blank looks on their faces. I said, why are you looking at me blankly? When a celebrity walks into the room, somebody you see on television, somebody who's a YouTube sensation or whatever, they walk into the room, you get all nervous, you get sweaty, you get clammy, you clam up, you can't talk, you have a problem. But when you walk and you're standing in front of God, the only God, because Commandment 1 says he's the only God, and you're standing there in front of God, God Almighty, you're not nervous. You're not clammy. You're not breathless. You're not going to faint. Why is it that if Justin Bieber walks into the room, you're going to faint? But if you walk into the room with God, you're not. And they look at me. And they don't have an answer. And I asked him, is it because Justin Bieber's tangible and God's not? Because you could see him, you could touch him, you could feel him, you could talk to him, you could kick him, you could spit on him. But you can't do that to God? So God is more of a belief, that you believe God is there, and Bieber is there, he's right in front of you? Is that the reason? I try to lead them on to get them to think. And they say, yeah. And I say, so you're worshipping an idol. Because that's exactly what idol worship was and is. In the absence of a physically present God, the society makes a statue. Society makes a statue, some kind of a monument to represent God, or to take on the image, to take on the responsibilities of God, and worships the monument. Because people find it hard to worship a God you can't see, hear, touch, or feel. So, when you worship a celebrity, you worship a singer, you worship an actor, you worship the politician, it depends who you are, I guess. When you worship these kind of people, you are violating commandment number 2. And commandment number 1. You're violating both commandments. You are making a god out of people. Hey, listen. This just didn't come out of nowhere either, right? Imagine how bad it got in the States, where they named a television show American Idol. And the goal of the winner of the show is to become the American Idol. You can't get clearer than that when it comes to idol worship. So what does it mean to be an American Idol? What does it mean? It means that people are going to throw money at you. People are going to bow to you. People are going to celebrate you. People are going to worship you. So it doesn't get clearer than that on how far we've come from do not worship idols, do not make them worship idols. We have really traveled far from there. Now, when we talk about not worshiping idols and talk about there's one God, we also have to not disrespect or misuse God's name. How often do you hear people disrespecting using God's name? All the time. Watch any Hollywood movie, and you're going to see a disrespect and a misuse of God's name. Listen to some schoolyard talk. Inevitably, you're going to hear somebody misuse or disrespect God's name. Listen to an atheist. Listen to anybody who dislikes religion, a non-affiliated person who dislikes religion. And they're not going to have nice things to say about God. They're going to disrespect and misuse God's name. But you know who else misuses and disrespects God's name? Terrorists. Terrorists who kill, and I don't care what religion they are, terrorists who kill in the name of God. They are misusing and they are disrespecting God's name. People who wear religious uniforms, who are identifiably religious by vision and do immoral things. We're going to take a little break. I'm Howie Silberger. This is Political Hitman. And you could call in. The numbers are on the top of the page on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. We'll see you in a couple of seconds. I'm Howie Silberger, your political hitman here on Israel News Talk Radio. Join me in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. The chat room button is right there on the top of the page. Just go there and click on that chat room button. I'm in the chat room the entire show. On the top of the page, you'll also find the phone numbers to call in. In North America, the number is 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 02-6500-151. That is the number to call from Israel. In North America, 301-768-4841. We're talking about the Ten Commandments. And do we really follow the Ten Commandments? And can we really follow the Ten Commandments in today's society? I'm going through the commandments one by one. And I'd really like to hear from you, so feel free to call in. Once again, North America 301-768-4841, Israel 0265000151. So we've gotten to commandment number 3. Don't disrespect or misuse God's name. As I said, one commandment leads into the other one, which is really the beauty of the 10 Commandments. That taking them out of context doesn't make any sense, but within context, you see that it's a divine design that leads one into the other. So number 3, do not disrespect or misuse God's name, is really not followed at all, especially in North America. I'm not sure about other countries, but I'm sure other countries are exactly the same as North America. When you watch any North American movie, inevitably you're going to hear somebody misuse or disrespect God's name. When you listen to a schoolyard conversation, you're going to hear kids disrespecting God's name. And when you take a look at crime, and some crime in the Jewish community, you're going to see people dressed up like religious people committing crimes. Now, these people who are dressed up like religious people committing crimes aren't really religious, because you can't be a religious person committing crimes. That's an oxymoron, so that doesn't work. But what these people do is they disrespect and misuse God's name, because people assume that these are people of God, and when they see them doing evil stuff or immoral stuff, they assume that that's God's will. And so that's disrespecting and misusing God's name. All right, let's move on to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Now, there's a minority of Jews, and a really, really small minority of Jews worldwide that keep the Sabbath. It's growing, by the way. The number is growing, but in the overall proportion of the Jewish community that keeps the Sabbath, according to Pew Research, it's approximately 3 to 4% of Jews keep the Sabbath and keep it holy. Now, 3 to 4% of Jews that keep the Sabbath, that claim to keep the Sabbath and keep it holy, is really a minute percentage of the Jewish community, which is really sad when you come to think of it, because when you talk to a non-affiliated Jewish person or non-affiliated person, and you talk about the Sabbath, and you talk about how to follow the Sabbath and how to keep the Sabbath, the first thing you say, the first thing you hear from them is, "Oh my gosh, I can't do that. There's too many rules, and I can't use electricity, and I can't watch television, and I can't use my cell phone. There's no way I could keep the Sabbath." And this I hear all the time, because what's happened is that Judaism has done a really, really terrible job in marketing their own religion. They've done a terrible job in marketing Sabbath, in marketing kosher, in marketing the tenements of the Jewish religion. Instead of focusing on the positive and focusing on the beautiful part of the Sabbath, and focusing on the beautiful part of keeping kosher, and I put Sabbath and keeping it holy and kosher in the same category, even though kosher is not mentioned in the 10 Commandments, I think that remembering the Sabbath and keeping it holy is also, kosher fits into there too. And the reason I think that is because the reasons that people give for not keeping the Sabbath are the same reasons they give for not keeping kosher. So since the two are linked outside of the 10 Commandments, I'm going to link them inside the 10 Commandments for the sake of this argument. So, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Why is that important? Why should we keep the Sabbath holy? Well, because on the seventh day God rested. We all know the story of the Genesis. So on the seventh day God rested, and that's fine, creation story. But another thing that we starting to notice now in 2020 is that people are taking a technology break day. So they're taking one day a week where they're not using technology. They're not using electricity. They're not using technology. They're just taking the day off from the world, from the connected world. Jews have been doing that for 3,000 years. It's called the Sabbath. So when we take a look at the Sabbath, at the blessings of the Sabbath, rather than the do not do this, do not do that, the strict rules of the Sabbath, but if we take a look at the blessing of the Sabbath, the disconnect from the world for 24 hours, the ability to focus on God, to focus on religion, to focus on good stuff for 24 hours. The idea that not to be distracted by your technology, not to be distracted by your business, not to be distracted by your outside influences, but to be able to focus yourself. I think that is more valuable than working 7 days a week. Now, I had a friend who owned a store, and he told me that he never kept the Sabbath. And he worked in a store 7 days a week, like a cow, like a dog. He worked 7 days a week. One day, he decided that there was enough. He was going to start keeping the Sabbath. And so he started closing his store early on Friday and started closing his store on Saturdays. And his wife thought he was crazy. His wife told him, buddy, you're going to go out of business. Friday night, Saturdays are your most busy days, and now you're closing? You're crazy. But you know what happened? He was closed on Friday night and Saturday. People liked his product, so they came on Sunday. And they came on Thursday. And he did not see a decrease at all in his sales. He didn't lose any money by closing on Sabbath. He didn't lose any money. His wife thought he was nuts. His wife said, you're going to lose money for sure. And he didn't lose a penny. Now, I'm saying that we should all take a day off. And when I close my phone and I close my computer, I'm on the computer and the phone all week long. When I close my computer and I close my phone on a Friday evening before Shabbat starts, I forget about it. I don't even think about it. I don't think about it until Saturday night, and even Saturday night, sometimes I forget to turn the phone back on. I don't care. Whoever wants to contact me could leave me a message. I'll call them back. They could send me a text message, send me an email, whatever. I will eventually get to it, and I will get back to them. I don't care. Now, people look at me and say, oh, you're an old man. What about a teenager addicted to cell phones? So let me tell you this story. I had a kid that was in one of my classes, and he came up to me one day. He said, Howie, I have a story to tell you. And I said, okay. And he said, listen. He says, I grew up in a religious home. I grew up in a Shomer Shabbos home, a house that followed Sabbath. And all my friends are secular. He was about 15 years old when he told me the story. He says, listen, on Friday nights they all go out, and I stay at home. And they all have these text conversations, and they're busy online, and I'm sitting at home. And I'm not part of it. So I want to be part of it, he said to me. So I went, and I told my friends, this coming Friday night, I'm going to use my phone. And I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to eat dinner with my family. Then I'm going to go upstairs to my bedroom. And I'm going to check the messages. I will answer you. And if we have to go out, if you're going out, I'm going to come and join you. He says, and that Friday night, he went and he turned on his phone. He ate dinner with his family. He ran up to his bedroom and he started texting his friends. And he said it felt weird. He wasn't comfortable with it. And then his friends said, all right, we're going to pick you up a block away from your house so your parents don't see. Leave the house and come join us, and we're going to a bar. 15 years old, they start going to bars. That's what it is, right? He says he left the house and he started walking to the corner where they were going to pick him up. And when he got to the corner, the car pulled up and he refused to get in. He says, you know what? I can't do this. He said, I can't do this. He says, it's not the guilt that my parents would be mad at me. It's not the guilt that he said, it wasn't about guilt. It didn't feel right. He says, I understood something that these kids didn't understand. At 15, he got the message. He says, I understood what these kids didn't understand. I understood the specialness of the Shabbat. I understood why it's important to honor God. I understood it. He says, I grew up with it. It was kind of road. I felt like I was being forced into it. But then when I had the option not to follow it, I decided to follow it because suddenly I understood. It came to me. As I was walking to that car, he says, it came to me. It hit me on why it's special. I don't have to be part of everything. I don't have to be part of what everybody else is doing. I don't have to pretend to be like everybody else. He says to me, I am Jewish. And being Jewish is special. And I don't have to pretend to be anything other than Jewish. I looked at him, and I was very impressed. And he says to me, I had to tell you the story, he says, because I know that you would understand what I'm saying and that you would be proud of me. He said, if I told my father the story, he would be mad at me. He says, but I know if I told you the story, you'd be proud of me. And I was proud of him. And I was proud of him because he used his brain. And he used his brain and his feelings, and he connected everything. And he made that connection. He built that puzzle. Now, I wish he would have been able to push that onto his friends. I wish he'd be able to explain that to his friends. He wasn't able to explain it to his friends, but I was proud of him. All right, we're going to take a little break. When we come back, we will continue here on Political Hitman. Feel free to call in North America 301-768-4841. In Israel 0265000151. I'm Howie Silberger, your political hitman here on Israel News Talk Radio. Feel free to call in. Numbers in North America 301-768-4841. In Israel 0265000151. Numbers are on top of the page at israelnewstalkradio.com. So, number 5 of the 10 Commandments. We are looking at the 10 Commandments. Number 5, honor your mother and your father. COVID-19 has proven that many people do not honor their mother and their father. COVID-19 has proven that many people just throw their mother and their father into a nursing home and never visit. I've read too many stories in the last couple of weeks about people dying in nursing homes and the nursing home having no family to call because nobody ever came to visit the people. Honor your mother and your father. Why is it in the Ten Commandments? Simply because God created the world. God created everything. Your mother and your father created you. So, the honor your mother and your father fits into, it actually directly relates to Commandment 1 and to Commandment 2. Commandment 1 and 2 are honor your God, the creator of the world. And Commandment 5 is honor your mother and your father, your personal creator. So, you must honor creation, must honor the creators. And your mother and your father created you, God created the world, therefore they ranked in the top 10 as number 5 in honor your mother and your father. Now number 6, 7, and 8, and kind of 9 all fit together. So let's look at them quickly. Do not commit murder. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal, and do not tell lies. So this all kind of fits together. This could all be one commandment if God didn't want to be as clear and as precise as he is right here by creating 10 commandments. All these commandments could be one commandment. Number 6 through 9 could be one commandment. So do not commit murder. Now, when we think about murder, we think about the North American or the modern day explanation of murder. But murder could be considered in a much broader sense. So, murder in Judaism, at least, is considered when you insult somebody in public, embarrass somebody in public. It's as if you've murdered them. Murder could be stealing somebody's soul. Murder could be, murder is stealing somebody's soul, but that's also do not steal. So you see, it all kind of fits together. It all kind of works their way around. Do not commit adultery. So you kill somebody internally. If you commit adultery on somebody, you destroy them emotionally. So that's as if you've murdered them, and you've stolen their soul. So 6, 7, 8, you murdered them, stole their soul. If you lie about somebody in court, and that person ends up convicted of a crime they didn't commit, and ends up in jail, you stole their lives, because now they've lost their lives for whatever amount of time they're in jail. So you've stole their lives, and to a certain extent, you've murdered them, because now they do not exist as a functioning human being in society anymore. So when somebody goes to jail, it is as if you have murdered them, because they do not exist as a functioning society member. When they come out of jail, so they've come out of jail. It's not the resurrection of the dead, but when they come out of jail, they reintegrate into society. But sometimes they can't, because they have been murdered. Their entire character, their entire being has been ripped out of them. So do not steal, do not commit adultery, and do not commit murder. Are all basically one commandment. Do not tell lies is also part of the same commandment, because every time you tell a lie, you are hurting someone. Now, of course, we all tell lies. All of us, we're all guilty of that. And sometimes we tell white lies to protect people, and sometimes we tell bold-faced lies to protect ourselves. But we're all guilty of telling lies. There's nobody in the world who hasn't lied. Now, the severity of the lie and the consequences of the lie are problems. So do not tell lies. Do not bear false witness. Do not get up in court and say you saw somebody do something that they didn't. Do not claim that you know something that you do not know. And do not make false accusations against people. We see that a lot in politics, where false accusations are thrown out and people's reputations and lives are ruined. So once again, you tell a lie, you've ruined their reputation, you've stolen their reputation, so basically you've murdered them. And so you told a lie, it's commandment number 9. You stole their reputation, commandment number 8, and then you've murdered their reputation, which is number 6. So you see, they all kind of intermingle. So do not tell lies is really it's really an important one, and one that we should all start following as much as possible, because the world is full of lies. Media lies to you all the time. Politicians lie to you all the time. You lie to, people lie to their wives. Why kids lie to their parents? Everybody's lying. Stop it. Let's just be honest. I try not to lie as much as possible. I'm never going to say I don't lie. I used to say I never lie, but if you catch me in a lie, then I've lied. And by me saying I've never lied, I'm probably lying because I'm sure at one point or another I've had to cushion the truth, or I've had to alter a story in order to make it more palatable for my audience or for an audience. We've all had to stretch the truth a little bit, but a little white lie to protect somebody is not really all that damaging. But a major lie, a standing against somebody, a testimony against somebody's reputation, a testimony against somebody in a court of law, and lying about that is much more dangerous than a little white lie. So severity, and you got to balance it. Life is a balance. Number 10, we've gotten to number 10, and number 10 is: do not covet your neighbor's goods. Don't be envious. Don't be jealous of what your neighbor has. I've spoken to people who said, "Look at that guy. He drives a Jaguar. He has a condo, a penthouse condo in a ritzy building. Oh, he's so rich. Look at that store. Look how busy they are. Wow, that guy's raking it in." I've heard this millions of times over the course of my life. Let me tell you a story. Years ago, I volunteered for B'nai B'rith. And B'nai B'rith, around Passover, hand out charity baskets, Passover charity baskets. And so I went with my father. My father was very active in B'nai B'rith. We went to hand out charity baskets. And we walked into, we took the baskets from the depot and we drove off. And one of the addresses we had was at this ritzy building. This building was like a building that I could never even I could never even dream of living in. It's that ritzy. I would never have the money to be able to afford this building. We stop in front of the building. We go to the doorman. The doorman says, we ask the doorman for this person. The doorman says, yes, her. She's in the penthouse apartment in this ritzy building. The apartment must be worth at least $2.5 million. And we headed up the elevator and we got into the apartment. The door was open. We walked in, and the plush carpets were there. We walked through the plush carpets. You know, those carpets that were so deep they covered your ankle. And we put the box down in her, the charity box down in her kitchen. And we looked around, and the leather couches and the big screen TVs. And she said, "Thank you very much." And we left. Now, it wasn't our job to judge the people. It was our job to deliver the baskets. So we delivered the baskets and we left. When we got back to the office, we filled out a form saying, all right, maybe we should investigate this, because sometimes there's a little bit of fraud. So maybe we should investigate this and make sure that this person's not taking a basket that could be going to somebody who really needs it. And sure enough, when we checked in on the investigation, we found that the woman had just gotten divorced. And not only did she just get divorced, but her husband got everything. And this was the last Passover she was spending in that apartment. After that, she was pretty much homeless. She didn't have a job. Her husband had the business, and she had nothing. She had no money. And she didn't even have money to buy food for Passover for her and her children. The husband wouldn't give her a penny. She was living in the apartment for another 2 weeks before she was evicted. And she had to go and find somewhere else to live. So you never know. And never make a judgment call, because you never know. So therefore, sometimes when you're envious of your neighbor, when you see that your neighbor has a beautiful car or a fancy house or something, or bought something that you really, really want, keep in mind it might all be an illusion. Sometimes it is. And sometimes the debt level that your neighbor is in, and the thing that you're envious of isn't even his or hers in today's society. Sometimes it's all an illusion. And so this is why this is in the Ten Commandments. And this is what we have to be wary of. We have to start following the Ten Commandments. If we want to survive in society, we We have to start bringing morality back. And the way to bring morality back is to bring back and start following the 10 Commandments. I wish everybody would heed the call of God and would look at least at the 10 Commandments, the minimum of the 10 Commandments, and start following, and make it a point to follow 1, to follow 2, to follow 3, and to try to make the 10 Commandments a part of your life. I think by doing that, we're going to make the world a much better place. We're going to make society a better place. We're going to make life a lot better. I want to wish everybody listening a very happy Shavuot. I will be back next week here on Israel News Talk Radio with Political Hitman. My name is Howie Silberger, and I will see you next week.